guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing something similar to my last video, because apparently these 5th edition army books all have sort of dramatic tellings of a battle in the back. So today we are going to be doing the one out of the Wood Elves book. Let's just get right into it. Guiding his great white charger onwards through the trees, the horse stepping carefully over exposed roots and mossy hummocks, the questing knight advanced further into the woods. His quest was of the utmost importance, and it was imperative that he succeed. None had done so before him, and his honor was at stake. It had been just after dawn 5 days ago when Gaston de Gaillard had reached the edge of the forest. Having passed beyond the age-worn boundary stones and crossed the tract of open heathland that made up the borderlands of Athel Loren, the knight had already completed a long and arduous trek, and yet the most perilous part of his journey was still to come. During those 5 days, the wooded landscape had varied dramatically. One day his horse was climbing over high, boulder-strewn crags, the vast panorama of the forest canopy laid out below him like a sea of rippling green. The next he was riding along the banks of a mist-shrouded lake, strange croakings echoing through the fog. As well as being a shadowy world of dark mysteries, the enchanted forest was also a place of spectacular beauty. Gurgling streams splashed between mossy banks, and at times Gaston found himself in groves with lush, flower-strewn lawns. In such areas he was careful that his horse did not crush too many of the delicate blooms under its hooves. But the knight did not let the wonder of it all overwhelm him. Instead, he concentrated on watching for any signs that he was about to be challenged by the guardians of the forest. So far, no wood elves had attempted to impede his progress, but the deeper he intruded into their realm, the more likely he felt it was that he would be called to account. Passing an elm split down its middle in times past by lightning, Gaston rode on, listening out for any sound that might belie the presence of camouflaged archers. An hour later he passed the same tree again. Another 10 steady steps forward, and suddenly Gaston found himself in an entirely different part of the woods, yews and pines proliferating where before there had been sturdy ash and elm trees. It was as if the forest were distorting itself around the trespasser, and time no longer had any meaning. Perhaps this disturbing effect had begun as soon as Gaston left the wild heaths for the country beneath the leafy bowers, and he had been riding for 10 days rather than 5. Or possibly, perceived from the real world outside, he had only entered the forest a few hours ago. Whatever the truth, the questing knight would not let this strangeness prevent him from delivering his message. I haven't read this before, but I'm guessing that there's going to be some sort of chaos involvement that the Bretonnians need the help of the Wood Elves for. Dusk fell in the Twilight Realm, and Gaston considered making camp for the night, and then he saw the flickering lights visible in the distance. Sure that he must be, at last, nearing his goal, Gaston urged his steed on, putting aside all thoughts of rest. However, as he approached the lights, he saw them dance away towards more densely thicketed regions. The ground was becoming softer beneath his charger's hooves, which sank a few inches more with every step. Gaston had heard rumors of the will-o'-the-wisps that could lure travelers away from the safe paths to perish in bottomless marshes, or lead them to their doom in the lairs of mighty forest beasts. Turning his horse around, the knight rode back to firmer ground. The trees gave way to a grassy glade, and something large flew overhead, slow, silent wing beats sending buffeting gusts against the night. Glancing upwards, Gaston glimpsed for a moment a silhouette against the shining white face of the moon, like a moth against a candle flame. Then it was gone. laugh echoed between the trees. Scanning the glade, the knight could see nothing. Then, like a chuckling brook, the laughter came to Gaston's ears again, and this time he caught sight of a slender creature skipping through the waist-high grass. Clad only in a shimmering gown. Oh my, they put a comma in the wrong place. The way it's written is, clad only in a shimmering, gown. The maiden was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Her waist-length hair shone like silver in the moonlight, and as she turned to face him, a seductive smile played on her lips. He saw her violet eyes sparkle. As he watched, other elf women emerged from the forest into the glade. Gaston was bewitched by their unearthly beauty, their fine features, their ivory skin, and their slender, alluring bodies. He started to forget who he was and where he was going. In a sudden moment of lucid clarity, Gaston realized what was happening. Forcing himself to remember the purpose of his mission, the knight set his mind once more towards reaching the court of the Wood Elves. Resisting the charms of the forest maidens by sheer strength of will, King Lewin's messenger pressed on. Oh, King Louis's messenger. Oh, so this takes place in the past. No longer distracted by the otherworldly temptresses, not even when they brushed softly past him, and he felt their fragrant kisses blowing on his cheek. Gaston guided his horse through the glade, back into the all-enveloping woods, and the maidens vanished like dreams with the coming of dawn. Gaston slowly became aware of a far-off crashing, like the snapping of thick branches, and the sound of trees being uprooted. He reacted instantly by reaching for his sword, his hand hovering over it, fingertips touching the hilt, but stopped himself. He could not act in a hostile manner. He was supposed to bring a message of peace to the forest. Gripping the reins even tighter and keeping his head facing only forwards, the knight did his best to pay no heed to the sounds of monstrous things bearing down on him. Suddenly, Gaston found himself assailed from all directions by shrieking sylvan spirits. Whip-like lashing limbs cracked the air in front and behind. Whirling tangles of thorn swept close to his horse's flanks, and gnarled wooden fingers, each as long as a man's arm, grabbed for him, watched by eyes staring out from knots in the bark of mighty oaks. Gaston dug his spurred heels into the charger's sides. With a whinny, the horse broke into a gallop, jumping fallen logs and crashing through the bracken ground cover in its flight. His heart beating at the same steady rate, the knight remained calm, determined not to be discouraged from his quest by the supernatural guardians of the haunted forest. The knight's horse, however, did not share its master's resolve. A great tree trunk leg was suddenly planted directly in the path of the charger, as a lumbering oak stomped toward the intruders. Gaston's mount shied and reared before bolting away from the tree man. Hanging half out of the saddle, the knight clung onto the charger's mane for dear life. A screen of leafy boughs parted, and the mage queen of Loren glided silently into the arbor of the council glade. Her vast moth wings glittered in a myriad of colors, as the shafts of sunlight caught every gleaming scale. Even in her terrifying war aspect, Ariel was possessed of an otherworldly beauty. She was followed by a disheveled-looking character who had staggered into the clearing, blinking in the trailing stardust shower that fell from her scintillating iridescent body. The man was obviously a human knight, although his armor was tarnished with swamp slime, and his once fine cloak was muddied and torn. His helmet was missing, and his hair was a tousled mess. The knight also came on foot, humbled by the loss of his steed. Ariel descended gently to the glade floor. As she did so, she visibly diminished in height, becoming as tall as any other she-elf. Her wings folded, shrinking as they did so, seeming to become part of her regal robes. Transformed back from her sylph form, as Isha. Ariel became again the queen in the wood, the most stunning of elven women. In the shady cool, Gaston took in the breathtaking scene, his mouth agape in wonder. The council glade itself was formed by a circle of massive ancient oaks, but they were not like any trees the Bretonnian had ever seen. It was as if the trunks and branches had twined together as they grew, forming a maze of galleries and pathways through the treetops, in which the Wood Elves now dwelt. Every tree was festooned with dangling creepers, verdant foliage, and wild white roses. A feather-robed figure, who Gaston took to be a mage, stood before a young oak, singing an eerie, lilting chant, never seeming to pause for breath. It was as if he were singing directly to the tree, and as the bewildered knight watched, the oak's supple branches gently twisted and bent in response to the mage's weird melody, new green buds thrusting from the hardening brown skin with every cadence. Other mages and elven nobility thronged the glade, richly dressed in incredible costumes fashioned from nothing but plant-spun threads, and what Athel Loren provided in the way of leaves and soft ferns. The chieftains as well, as being adorned with jewelry of polished walnut and mahogany beads, wore badges or heirlooms marking out their status and the kindred to which they belonged. In one corner of the great glade, a band of elven youths performed elaborate dances of the utmost physical complexity, relating the renowned fables of their culture through their dramatic movements. Not far from them, a feral-looking elf lavished care and attention on a dozing saber-toothed tiger. It was apparent to the knight that the elven folk of Athel Loren lived in complete harmony with the trees, plants, and animals of the forest, totally in tune with their environment. He was truly awestruck by the Wood Elves' affinity with nature, and then his gaze fell upon the lord of this magical, unspoiled domain. Orion, king in the wood, sat upon a throne at the edge of the glade. The living wood had been carved with depictions of Wood Elves feasting, dancing, and fighting. He was incredibly handsome, his noble features belying a wisdom acquired over generations beyond measure. Ariel took her place on the ornate throne next to her husband's. The sight of these two wondrous and awesome beings only made the night all the more... Oh my, we're missing a word here. The sight of these two wondrous and awesome beings only made the knight all the more aware of his own failings and insignificance. Before the immaculate Wood Elves, Gaston was also reminded of his own bedraggled appearance. The queen turned her piercing eyes on Gaston. "My lord," she said sweetly, addressing Orion, "the human has been tested and found to be noble of heart and true of purpose. Even when beset by our plant brethren, he resisted the urge to draw his weapon. He requests to speak with the king in the wood on behalf of his liege, a king among men." Overcoming his exhaustion, Gaston prepared to address the sovereign lord of the Wood Elves. He bowed low before the king and queen, enthroned in all their mystic glory. "Your Majesty, let me first offer my most sincere apologies for entering your presence in such a sorry condition," Gaston began, surreptitiously brushing the moss from his clothes. A wry smile had appeared on Orion's face. "Arise, Sir Knight, and be welcome here," he said, his voice a rich baritone in contrast to the other elves. "Perhaps it is I who should be apologizing to you." "Surely not, my liege," Gaston interjected. Orion threw back his head and laughed, shaking his mane of hair. "You have been watched since you entered our realm. As you rode over the heathland, riders mounted on great birds of prey circled high in the sky above you. In the woods, scouts concealed themselves in the bushes to watch you, and in the forest, spied on you from the trees." Orion's voice, deep and booming, had a certain quality about it that made Gaston think of a lion roaring. "I know that that to your kind our behavior is not easy to comprehend, but to us the ways of man seem disturbing and cruel. Man destroys where we create and nurture. You try to dominate the land, to bind it with roads and weigh it down with buildings, while we wish only to live in harmony with nature and share its beauty and munificence. This land is our home, and we shall let none despoil it. But come, tell us, why did you brave such perils to gain an audience with the king and queen in the wood? Ariel inquired. I, Gaston de Galliard, come bearing salutations from Louis, king of all Bretonnia. As well as greetings, I bring the offer of eternal friendship from my people, and am charged to entreat your most royal highness to join us in an alliance with the kingdom of Bretonnia. Orion and Ariel listened attentively as the king's messenger outlined the proposal for the peace treaty. His speech over, the knight bowed again. Thank you, Sir Gaston, Orion rumbled. We shall retire to consider your proposals. While you await our decision, you may care to enjoy our hospitality. We have prepared a feast in your honor, and my people will no doubt be entertained by tales from the land of men. Rising from her throne, Ariel took Gaston by the arm and led him out of the glade, darting a savage smile at her husband. When you have eaten and rested, we will talk further, for it is obvious that we have much to discuss. As the exhausted knight allowed himself to be led away, he couldn't help wondering what had happened to all the other knights who had ventured into the forest of Loren on the same quest as himself, never to be seen again. He was sure the Wood Elves knew, but realized it would be impolitic to ask. By some combination of fate and circumstance, he, Gaston, had succeeded where so many others had failed, and his name would be immortalized in the history of his people forevermore. Okay, so what I thought it was going to be, it was not. That was cool, though. Although I suspect that poor Gaston probably never made it back out of the woods. Yeah. Well, there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna look for more stuff like this, because this sort of active narrative stuff is super cool. Yeah. If by chance any of you have specifically older army books that you would be willing to let go of, leave a comment or something, because I would love to get my hands on more of these. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I already said that. Alright, bye-bye.